Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that I have a brand new masterclass coming out on the 18th of April. It's the 7 Steps to Podcasting. This was voted for by my social media audience. It won out against the other by a margin, so I will do both at some point, but the first one is going to be the 7 Steps to Podcasting. So if you want to come and join me for this masterclass, it's going to run for about an hour on the 18th at 4 p.m. UK time. So join me by hitting the link in the show notes or head over to donnaeade.com/7 podcast steps, all one word. That's donnaeade.com/7 podcast steps. Now back to the episode. You're listening to the Mindset and Action Podcast, the place to be to grow and streamline your business. I'm your host, Donna Eade. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody, on this very special occasion. So we are actually celebrating 4 years on the podcast. As I'm recording this, it was yesterday. As you're listening to this, if you're listening on the day it drops, it was 2 days ago. But the podcast is now 4 years old. And you guys know that when I have a celebratory, milestone moment on the podcast, that I actually like to do a little bit of a off the cuff review, look at what's working, what's not, etc. So that is what today is going to be. I hope there are going to be a few nuggets in there for you as we go along, but I'm very much off the cuff today, and that is because I'm going to be really honest with you guys and let you know that, things behind the scenes have not been as smooth sailing recently as they have been in the past. And you guys will know that I talk a lot about batching and productivity, and have done a lot of that on the podcast over the years. And it all has kind of gone out the window for me in recent months. And I really haven't got back into a rhythm since starting back up in January, to be honest with you. When I came back in January, the podcast started with 2 episodes a week, which I've been loving doing. And then also I launched a new podcast as well. So that's 3 episodes a week. And I just haven't been able to get myself back into a system of working. And it's really sort of affected things, like the fact that I'm recording this the day before it goes out. And you know me, I don't do things like that. So yeah, and it's really been something that I've struggled to get my head around. And last week I was a little bit ill, not like, not looking for sympathy at all. But what happened was I'd planned a week where I could work on my business to try and get me back into these routines that I used to have. And I was struck down with a head cold. And if you've ever had a head cold, it's horrible because it's like the body is willing, but the head is saying, no, can we go back to bed, please? I can't even focus on that screen, let alone do anything productive. So it's been difficult, and it's been interesting. So we are going to have a little look back on the podcast and what has been going well, and we'll jump into it. So first I wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody who is listening to this, whoever is getting this in their ears. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast and for listening and sharing and feeding back to me. It is so wonderful when I get your messages, and as the podcast grows, more messages come in and more feedback comes in, and I absolutely love that. And yeah, keep it coming. Viv is now joining me on Mondays for the mini Monday mindsets. She is a wealth of knowledge, so please do send me in questions. If you have mindset blocks that you need to shift, or if you're struggling with something in your business and you would like a bit of coaching around it, then, send me in questions. I can ask them anonymously, ask Viv her thoughts, and she'll be able to kind of give some insight for you. And I think that will be really beautiful way of kind of bringing us together in that community. So I've really been enjoying that. Bringing in the mini mindset Mondays was something that I said that I was going to kind of test and see how it went. And I've been really enjoying it. And it seems that you guys have been enjoying it too. My stats are kind of showing that, yeah, we're kind of getting a good balance between the Mondays and the Thursdays, that we're getting that kind of the same downloads for it. So I didn't want it to be a case of people either listening on a Monday or listening on a Thursday and not getting the value from the main episode. And that doesn't seem to be happening. We seem to be getting a good download rate for both. And you know me, I don't focus on the downloads in respective of the number. I just want to see an upward trend. So when I go to my stats and I'm looking at the last 90 days, am I seeing a trend upwards? And sometimes it's hard to see that because the line wiggles. When you upload an episode, it'll peak and then it drops back down again. So it is kind of a wave that goes up and down. But I can see that of the high points, my high point, back in January was at one level, and the high point that I got in April is higher than that. So to me, that's an upward trend. We've kind of got a bit of dipping and a rising in between, but the peaks are going in the right direction. So I'm happy with that. Obviously, I am happy to take your feedback with regard to the content that we're putting out on the episode, to the guests that I have on. If there are people that you want me to have back on, or people that you would like me to interview or you think would be a great fit for the podcast, then please do come and tell me. One of the things that I love to do when I do these look backs is to see what episodes are sort of trending on the top episodes of all time. And of course, this is a difficult list to get on, actually, because when you first start your podcast, if you get a podcast that gets an awful lot of downloads, then it can be that is then the episode to beat. And obviously every time somebody downloads your back catalogue, that one gets another download on it. So it's kind of constantly creeping up, and trying to get a new episode to take that one over can be quite difficult, but we have done it. So for those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome. This podcast started out as the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors podcast way back in 2020. And back then, I interviewed a lady called Tamryn Settle, and she was a celebrant in the industry, and she was part of the What About Weddings campaign that went on during COVID. And so I was very delighted to have her on the show to interview her about the movement and what was going on, what their plans were, etc. And it was a really, really good episode. And because of that, it got a lot of downloads, and it sat at the top of my list for ages. So even when I changed the name of the podcast to the Wedding Procast UK, it was still at the top. And when I changed it last year to the Mindset in Action, it was still at the top. But I am delighted to say, not because I'm upset that Tamryn was on top of the list, because I'm very proud of that episode. It was a great episode, but it doesn't fit the theme of the podcast now, because I don't talk about weddings exclusively. So now the top episode is Overcoming Fear of Judgment to Empower Business Growth, and that was my mini mindset series. That was number 185. Was that the first one I did? Because it says mini mindset series 1. Okay, so so I did a mini mindset series before for January, I believe. So I kind of tested the waters with a little series that I did, 4 episodes in this mini mindset genre. And yeah, episode 185 is like number top of the list. So if you want a podcast episode of mine to go and listen to, which is the best episode? Currently, that one is the best episode for downloads. So feel free to go back and it's a mini one. So a nice quick listen for you, episode 185. So that's really cool. And then we still have a few of the wedding ones in the top 5 there. And funnily enough, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. The 5th most popular episode was my episode 100, taking a look back at my top 5 downloads and how we got here, which is so funny to me that one got so many downloads when it was a look back episode, because typically these episodes don't do as well as my other ones. But yeah, so it's interesting to look at. And for me, what I want to say is, this is something that is fun to look back on, but it's not something to kind of make big decisions on. So knowing that overcoming fear of judgment is something that you guys are interested in, that means I know that I can go to Viv and go, do you know what? That was actually a really popular episode. Let's dig into that a little bit more. And maybe we'll talk about that in an upcoming episode so that you can get a bit more clarity around it from a coach who can help with that kind of thing. So yeah, it's good for that to sort of look back on and pull ideas for episodes that did well. So episodes that you might want to take a different angle on and do something similar. So that's really cool. I'm really happy to see those numbers and those stats. The new podcast, Mike Action Podcast, if you haven't listened to it and you are interested in podcasting, then I highly recommend going and taking a listen to that series. So it's going to be a seasonal podcast. It's not an every week. So 12 weeks. And then I'll take a break and I'll be back in the autumn with a new season for that podcast. But there are some cracking episodes up on there, and I absolutely love the one that went out this week. So if you missed it, I interviewed Catherine and Julie, who were on the podcast a few weeks ago on this one, about their experience of starting a podcast. And it was so funny. Those girls, they crack me up. So it was a really good episode talking about their experience. And obviously they went through my 8-week program, and that is now open for spring cohorts. So if you are looking to start a podcast, I would love to invite you to come and join me for my 8-week program. I have a class happening at 4 p.m. today as you're listening. So if you want to come and join that class and you're listening before 4 p.m, then there will be a link in the show notes for you to go over and do that. But if you go to donnaeade.com, there's a banner that you can click to register and get the link for it. So you can do that if you do that before 4 p.m. If you don't, then unfortunately you won't see the class. However, you will be able to go and have a look at the program over at donnaeade.com/apply. That will take you to the page that's got all the details about everything that happens in the program, how we break up the 8 weeks, all the bonuses that you get with the program, and the cost and pricing. I will be completely upfront with you right now. It's £888 for the 8-week program, and there is a payment plan of 222. So just to be transparent with you, if you would like to join me, I would love to have you. I keep my cohorts small, so it's a maximum of 6 people per cohort, and there are 3 dates to choose from for the spring cohort. So it's just basically trying to work out which date is going to be best for you on making the time to do the work, because at the end of the day, it is no good buying any course or program if you're not going to put aside the time to do it. So yeah, just have a look at your calendar and see what dates fit you best, and you can make that choice in the application. So there's an application form to fill in, and then I offer places, and that's just so that we don't get overbooked in any one cohort. And it's first come, first served for the dates and places. So if you want to come and join me, then please do go and look at donnaeade.com/apply. I would love to have you. I thoroughly enjoy that aspect of my business and taking people through the program. And if you want to hear from some people who have successfully launched their podcast through my program, then go and listen to that episode with Catherine and Julie, which I will link in the show notes as well. So that's really, really exciting stuff. So what's coming? What's coming down the line? So I think that this podcast is going to stay just as it is, trucking along with the Mini Mindset Monday and the Thursday episodes. And then Mike Action podcast has got 3 or 4 more episodes at this point. I can't calculate in my head, maybe 5 episodes to come before this season is finished. The first cohort of my Start Your Podcast program starts on the 29th of April. So that's the first one that you could possibly join. And I'll be running that up until the summer. And then I'm going to be taking a break, not from business, just from teaching, because I know the summer holidays, a lot of people go away with their children and things like that. And it messes things up for people. It's better when you've got a solid 8 weeks and that you haven't got those kind of family commitments running around in the background like that. So I will be taking a break from the cohorts over August, and then I'll be back with the autumn cohorts. But the podcast will continue in the meantime, and I'm really excited to be able to tell you that if you haven't seen on my website, I have now launched some VIP strategy days. So if you would like me to work with you on your podcast, on getting podcast ideas done, scripts. So maybe you don't need the technical side of the help. Maybe you feel like you don't necessarily need the full program, like you can do it. You just don't quite know how to structure it and put that stuff out there. Then I have VIP strategy days that can help you get that going. So going over what you're going to record when, how that fits in with your marketing plan, people who you might want to interview, sort of brainstorming those ideas, getting your setup and making that plan for you, and even maybe scripting out some of those podcast episodes. Obviously depends on how much we get done in the day. The day is yours to utilize for what you want in that respect. So those are available on my website. I do have limited time available, so you can book in for a call to discuss that with me. And then I also have the podcast audits that I have started to do as well. So if you are interested in me taking a look at your podcast, looking at the sound quality, looking at the production, looking at how it's set up, what you're talking about, the intro, outros, topics, content, all of that jazz, and kind of giving you feedback based on your downloads and things that you could do to improve and get a greater reach, then they are on my website as well, which is really cool. So there is lots there, lots of things that I can do to help you with your podcasting. I absolutely love podcasting. It's one of my favorite things to do. So there is nothing that I like more than getting the chance to speak on the microphone. So what I am looking at doing in the next quarter is looking at getting more speaking gigs, more speaking, more podcast guesting, more speaking in groups. I've been really enjoying doing some of that over the last 6 months, and it's something that I would like to do more of. So if you have a group that you're part of on Facebook and you think that podcasting could be a good topic for that group, then I would love for you to reach out to me on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever we're connected, and let me know, and I will see if I can speak to the person who runs the group and see if we can make it happen, because that would be awesome. So I said back at the beginning that I was looking at last week having this kind of week where I worked on my business instead of in my business, and part of that was actually to plan out the next 12 weeks or so of podcast ideas, just to kind of get myself situated with what the plan was going forward, and I didn't get a chance to do that, which has annoyed me. But I wasn't well, and I was rebranding. If you haven't noticed, did I mention that earlier? So rebranding, so trying to just make it a little bit more cohesive across the two podcasts and the website with my look. So hopefully you will see that in what you're looking at. So I was doing that, and that was kind of all I managed to get done through feeling absolutely awful. So the podcast is still a little up in the air, but my idea is that I really want to hone in on the 4 pillars of this podcast that I talk about: audience building, productivity, mindset, and planning, and kind of bringing people in that are going to help us with that. I love bringing in the health and wellness space, people to talk about how looking after ourselves is important when we're in business, because I think we all forget about it far too often. So I will always bring in those people, but I want to focus a little bit more this next quarter on the business of doing business. So that is what my focus is going to be. I'm trying to think if there is anything else that I've got coming up, because I feel like there is, and it's a great opportunity to tell you about it, but it's absolutely eluding me. So I'm not going to be able to tell you, but you'll have to come back and I'll let you know when I remember. So to wrap up on this episode, I am having a birthday at the end of this quarter, and the plan is that we're going to be going to Paris for my birthday. Well, not really for my birthday. We wanted to go to Paris. It just works out that the best time for us to go is my birthday weekend, which is fantastic for me. So that is coming up, and I am really excited about that because I've never been to Paris. Always wanted to go, never been. So that's really exciting. And it's on my vision board. So if you heard me talking about my vision board at the beginning of the year, Paris is on my vision board and I'm going to make it happen, which is amazing. And yeah, so that's kind of my big end to this quarter, really. And I really want to make it a fantastic quarter for you, for me, and yeah, just make it a day worth celebrating, my birthday and then the weekend in Paris. So that's kind of my celebration. And now I have to create the stuff that I can celebrate. And you have the same time as me. We both have a quarter, just under a quarter of a year to make some magic happen this quarter. So I am going to do my best to help you by bringing on some fabulous guests to talk about business. And I am going to do my best to help as many of you who want to come on the program to start and launch your podcast, because actually 12 weeks is exactly the time that it will take. So by the time we end the quarter, you'll be able to launch your podcast. And so lots of exciting things happening. The podcast is 4 years old. I can't believe the podcast is 4 years old. We're on episode 224, which is bonkers to me. I'm so grateful to all of you who listen and really enjoy hearing the things that I have to say, because I was speaking to somebody about a podcast episode that I've got coming out with them on their podcast coming soon. It's going to be a real deep dive. So if you want to, quite vulnerable, I think it's going to be. So if you want to get into the real mindset side of me and where I've come from, then I think that episode's going to be a really good one. But it reminded me of one of the big reasons that I continue to podcast. And that is because I come from a background of not feeling like my voice was important, not feeling like I really had a voice. And podcasting has allowed me to step into my voice and have an influence. And I don't take that lightly, and I never want to steer you guys wrong. So I do it with the utmost intention of bringing you great value. And when I get messages from people saying that episode was really good, or thank you so much for talking about that, or that guest was really great, I'm so glad you had them on. Messages like that mean the absolute world to me, because I grew up in a place where I would have to put my hand up to ask a question in my own home, and, you know, just have people ask me for advice and then not take it. And I think now I'm more cautious about who I give advice to, but also when you're younger, you take those things personally. So you're like, if you spend an hour sort of listening to somebody's woes and they ask you for your input and you give it and then they ignore it, it really feels like your words aren't worth anything. So I'm really glad to have this space, to have you guys who enjoy listening, and just to be able to share this with you guys and bring you guests that can offer you value and have you enjoy that. It brings me a lot of joy. It really does. And I'm so grateful for it. So thank you so much for listening for the last 4 years. Oh my God, I still can't believe it. And here's to the next 4. Let's make it magical. If you know of somebody who you think would be a great fit for this podcast as a guest, or if you yourself would like to be a guest, then please do reach out to me. I do have a form linked in the show notes, and that's the show notes that you'll find on the podcast players. I don't think it's linked in the blog post. I could be wrong. But there is a form that you can fill in. If you fill in that form and then send me an email, donna@donnaeade.com, and let me know that you filled it in, and I will go and check, and we'll look at getting you on. And yeah, so that is it. I'm going to call it quits there, guys. I know it's been a bit rambly, I've been a bit all over the place for this episode, but like I say, it's been a nightmare of the last few months of trying to plan and execute a plan with all of these podcast episodes going out, and I don't want to drop the quality, but this episode just ran away from me, and I wanted to take the time to sort of celebrate the 4 years with you guys in a more unscripted way with less sort of barriers to it. So I hope you don't mind that it was a bit of a rambly one this time. Back next week with another business episode and mini mindset episode on Monday. And I think I'm going to be doing that one because, like I say, I didn't get a chance to plan out the podcasts last week. So I am going to be bringing you something exciting next week. Stay tuned. And thank you for joining me today. And I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. If you're looking to build a deeper connection with your audience this year and you're a passionate business owner with a message to share, then I would love to help you do that via podcasting. If you're interested in starting a podcast this year, head over to donnaeade.com/apply to register your interest today. Don't forget to hit subscribe where you listen and rate and review the podcast if you've enjoyed it. You can also share this episode with a friend. It is a great way to help the podcast out to get to more listeners just like you.